The number on my screen didn't change no matter how many times I refreshed it. I was standing near the back of the Hargrove Community Center in Delwood, Ohio, holding a paper plate of potato salad I hadn't eaten, surrounded by 40-some members of my late wife's family, and my checking account balance read $47.13. It had read $4,877.13 that morning. I refreshed again. $47.13. I set the plate on the nearest folding table and stood very still. The room was loud. Kids running between the round tables, someone's uncle arguing about football near the drink station, the smell of pulled pork and industrial air conditioning drifting together in a way that usually meant a good afternoon. My brother-in-law Marcus was laughing at something across the room, his head thrown back, his hand on the shoulder of my mother-in-law Renata. He had that ease he always had at these things, the ease of a man who had never once organized a single detail of the event he was enjoying. I opened my transaction history. 1 withdrawal. 6:47 p.m. Sunday. $4,830. Joint account transfer, authorized. I read it a second time. Then a third. The number didn't adjust itself. The authorization code was real. The timestamp was 40 minutes ago, while I had been standing 15 feet away carrying a paper plate. I looked across the room at Marcus, still laughing, and the potato salad smell turned sharp in my throat. My name is Warren Adele. I am 51 years old. For 22 years I worked as a building inspector for Crestline County, and for the last 6 I have run my own small inspection and compliance consultancy out of the spare bedroom on Birchcroft Lane. The work is not glamorous. It involves a lot of driving, a lot of crawl spaces, and a lot of forms. It requires a particular kind of patience, the patience of someone who checks the thing that looks fine and finds the thing that isn't. It pays steadily, and I have always been careful with what it pays. Cora and I opened that joint account the year we got married. We used it for house expenses, the water heater, the new gutters, the property taxes. When she got sick, Marcus's name went on so he could transfer funds to her medical account without me having to stop mid-job to authorize every transaction. It was practical. Cora trusted him because he was her brother, and she was the kind of person who trusted her family. I had come to understand over the years that she was also the kind of person who made that trust look like the obvious choice, and that the trust ran only in the direction she said it. I trusted him because she did. Marcus Veldy was 44, perpetually between opportunities, as he described it, and perpetually certain that whatever he needed was reasonable and whatever others had was available. He was not a cruel man in the way that announces itself. He was cruel in the way that assumes the help will come, assumes the silence is consent, assumes that the person who never yells is the person who will absorb the most. He had a way of making borrowing sound like a courtesy he was doing you, a chance to demonstrate that you were the kind of family that showed up for each other. The family showed up for Marcus. That was the established rhythm. I had fallen into it without quite deciding to. The reunion itself was my doing. Not in name, Renata always called it her gathering, her tradition, but in logistics. I had reserved the Hargrove Community Center 8 weeks out, paid the deposit of $340, and then paid the balance of $680 the week before because Renata said she was a little short this month and would square up later. I had ordered the pulled pork from Delwood's one catering operation that could handle 40 people and paid $1,140 for it. I had driven to 4 different stores for the paper goods, the drinks, the folding tablecloths. I had loaded and unloaded the car twice that morning. By the time the first relative arrived, everything was in place and I was standing near the back with a plate of food I didn't intend to eat, which was where I usually ended up. That was the pattern across the 3 years since Cora died. Not because anyone asked directly. Marcus and his family rarely asked directly, but because the expectation had been established and I had not yet found the language to undo it. When the furnace went out at Renata's house the previous winter, I had arranged the contractor, made the calls, and covered the emergency service fee without being asked. When Marcus's van needed a repair that would cost more than he had on hand, I had transferred what he needed and received a voice note thanking me and promising he would get it back to me when things settled. Things did not settle in any direction that produced repayment. The renovation on Birchcroft Lane I had done largely by hand over 2 summers. the back porch, the kitchen subflooring, the bathroom tile, because the quotes I got were beyond what made sense on a single income. $14,200 worth of materials by my own accounting and more hours than I tracked. I did not bring it up at family dinners. I did not frame it as sacrifice or evidence of anything. I just did the work and came to these gatherings and ate the food and sat in the chairs and watched Marcus hold court. What I had contributed to this family, since Cora and before Cora, was not the kind of thing that showed up in a conversation unless someone needed it to show up. It showed up in fixed furnaces and paid deposits and transfers that became gifts without my agreeing that they were gifts. It showed up in a joint account that stayed open because closing it felt like grief I wasn't ready to file. It had showed up this evening as a $4,830 subtraction from my account at 6:47 p.m. on a Sunday. I crossed the room. I did not move quickly. I waited until Marcus turned from Renata and saw me coming, and I watched his expression do something brief and knowing before it smoothed back into ease. "Warren," he said. "You eat yet? That pork is something else." "I need to talk to you for a minute," I said. Sure. He didn't move toward a private corner. He stayed exactly where he was, near the drinks table, near Renata, in the middle of the room. The music from someone's phone was playing low near the far wall, something with guitar that nobody was listening to. I kept my voice level. "There's a transfer from the joint account. $4,830 today." He nodded, the way someone nods when they're confirming something they already know. "Yeah, I needed to cover something. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me. It's not a big deal, Warren. We'll work it out." Something went tight across my shoulders. Not fury, not disbelief. Something more like the moment before a structural crack becomes visible, when you can feel the pressure but not yet see the line. I kept my hands at my sides. "That account is not for you to move money from," I said. "My name is on it. Cora's name was on it. Yours was added for a specific purpose that ended 3 years ago." Marcus's expression shifted. The ease didn't leave it entirely, but something underneath it hardened. "Look," he said, "I had a situation. I didn't have time to ask. You always—" He stopped, recalibrated. "You've always been good about helping out. I didn't think it would be a thing." "It's a thing," I said. "We can talk about it later. This isn't the place." "You moved the money while you were standing in this room," I said. "This is the place." Renata had turned now. She was watching us with her arms crossed, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, her expression the careful neutral she used when she already knew which direction a conversation was going and had decided not to be the one to stop it. "What's going on?" she asked. "Nothing," Marcus said. "Warren's upset about something. He took $4,830 from a joint account this afternoon," I said. "Without asking." Renata's mouth pressed together. "Marcus," she said. But it wasn't a reprimand. It was the tone of someone who has heard this before and is tired of being the one in the middle. "He has access," Marcus said. "It's a joint account. That's how joint accounts work." "Having access isn't the same as having permission," I said. "Warren." Renata's voice softened in a way that felt like a closing door. "You know Marcus has been going through a hard stretch. You know that. This family takes care of each other." I said nothing. The guitar music from the far wall played on, low and indifferent. "I organized this reunion," I said. "I paid for this room and the food and the deposit. I've been taking care of a lot of things for a long time." "And we appreciate that," Renata said. "But you're being a little—" Marcus needed help and he knew you'd help him if he asked. "He just didn't want to bother you." "He didn't want to give me the chance to say no," I said. The word came from Marcus before I finished the sentence. "Ungrateful," he said, almost quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough. "You know, Cora always said you had trouble letting things be family. Everything's a transaction with you." The room went quiet in a radius around us. I stood with my hands at my sides. Marcus's sister Diane had drifted over from the far table. She was 38, a dental hygienist, and she had a way of arriving at family disputes at precisely the moment they were most volatile. "Warren," she said, with a sympathy that didn't reach her eyes, "nobody's trying to take advantage of you. Marcus is family. Your family. That's what this is." "He moved $4,830 from my account without asking," I said again. Diane looked at Marcus, then back at me. "I'm sure it'll get worked out. But making a scene at the reunion isn't." "I haven't raised my voice," I said. She didn't have an answer for that. 3 or 4 people near the drinks table had shifted position, not moving away exactly, but angling their bodies with the unconscious adjustment of people who are listening and would prefer not to admit it. Marcus's youngest nephew was watching from behind a folding chair, a paper cup in his hand. I excused myself. I said I needed to get something from my car, and I walked out through the community center's main doors into the parking lot, which smelled like August grass and asphalt and the faint diesel of someone's truck running idle at the far end of the lot. I stood next to my car for a moment with my hand on the door handle. I opened the back door. I reached into the back seat. I picked up my bag, the canvas work bag I carry to every inspection, gray and worn at the handles, with a small tear along the left strap that I had repaired twice with electrical tape, and I closed the car door. I walked back across the parking lot. I pushed open the community center doors. I walked back into the room. The family had not dispersed. Clusters of people stood near the tables and along the wall with the body language of people pretending they hadn't been listening. Marcus was by the drinks again, a cup in his hand, talking to Renata in a low voice. He looked up when I came in. His expression tried for ease and didn't quite reach it. I walked to the nearest folding table, the long one near the center of the room, and I set my bag on it. The laminate edge pressed against my palm as I braced. I reached into the bag. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app and navigated to the joint account transaction log. 22 months of history. 11 transfers to Marcus's accounts, or to accounts he had directed me toward, utilities, a down payment on a lease, the van repair, smaller amounts that had accumulated the way quiet water accumulates, $200 here, $600 there, one large $1,800 move 18 months ago that he had described as a bridge until his contract paid out. The contract had paid out. The bridge had not come back. I set the phone face up on the table, screen toward Marcus. He looked at it. He didn't move toward it immediately. "That's the transaction log," I said. 22 months. $8,340 before today if you want to add it up. Plus today's $4,830. That's $13,170 total, not counting the reunion expenses or the furnace repair, which I have receipts for separately. Renata made a sound that was not quite a word. "Warren," Marcus started. Then the side door of the community center opened with a bang, the metal push bar striking the doorframe, and the center's facility manager, a heavy-set man in a polo shirt, leaned in. "I need to ask you folks to bring it down," he said. "We've got another booking in the East Wing and they can hear you through the partition." He looked at the room, took in the stillness, and left, letting the door close behind him. The room was very quiet. Marcus looked at the phone on the table, then at me, and for the first time that evening he didn't have an expression ready. Something moved behind his eyes that I had not seen there before. It was not remorse, exactly. It was the look of a man who had calculated on the room absorbing the situation and was realizing, slowly, that the room was waiting on him. "You said I have trouble letting things be family," I said. My voice was even. The laminate was still pressing into my palm and I didn't move my hand. "You said everything is a transaction. But you just told me you took $4,830 because you needed it more. That's a transaction, Marcus. You decided the terms, and you decided I didn't get to know about it until after." He didn't answer. "I kept this account open for 3 years because it had Cora's name on it," I said. "That wasn't an invitation. That was grief. And you used it." I picked up the phone. I held it for a moment and then put it back in my bag. "I'm going to close this account on Tuesday," I said. "I should have closed it 3 years ago. I didn't, and that's on me. But I'm telling you now, in front of everyone, so there's no version of this where I didn't. I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my bag from the table and I walked out. 4 months later, the joint account was closed, had been closed since that Tuesday, and I was sitting at the kitchen table on Birchcroft Lane on a Saturday morning with the old ledger book open in front of me. It was a composition-style book with a cardboard cover that had warped years ago from sitting too close to the sink. The one Cora and I had used in the early years before everything moved to apps, when we wrote down every household expense by hand and totaled the columns on Sunday evenings. Her handwriting was in the first third of it, neat and slightly tilted, with small margin notes beside some of the larger amounts. Water heater, February, gutters, April replaced 2 sections. Mine took over in the back half, after she couldn't anymore. I had found it in the kitchen drawer the week after I got home from the community center, and I had been keeping it there on the table since, not as ceremony, but because it was the clearest record I had of what this account had actually been for. The inspection work had been steady through the fall. I had taken on 2 commercial contracts that kept me out until early evening most weekdays, and in the mornings I had been finishing the last section of the back porch railing. Pressure-treated lumber, the work I had put off for 2 seasons because there had always been something else drawing on my time and energy. It was done now, sealed and solid. I stood on it most mornings with a cup of coffee and it didn't move under my weight. Marcus texted in November. The message said he thought we should clear the air and that the family missed me at Thanksgiving. I read it twice. I put my phone face down on the table. I went back to the ledger. I am not certain what he expected. Perhaps that I would call back and tell him it was fine, the way things had always eventually been fine before, the way the silence between us had always eventually been filled by my willingness to fill it. There was no version of Tuesday I regretted. There was no version of that room. The guitar music, the laminate table, the facility manager leaning in from the side door, that I wanted to revisit. But regret and grief are not the same thing, and I had learned that clearly enough in the 3 years since Cora. What I missed was simpler and harder to say. I missed the version of these people that had existed when she was alive and I was the person standing next to her, which had given me a place in the architecture of the family that was real because she made it real. Without her, I had been trying to maintain my place in the structure by doing what she would have done. Showing up, covering the gaps, absorbing what needed absorbing. That was not sustainable and it had not been honest, and I had known it for longer than I had admitted. The ledger sat on the table in the winter light from the kitchen window. Cora's column totals were precise, carried in blue ink. Mine were in pencil from the years after, in case I needed to correct them. The last few pages were blank. I was not ready to fill them in yet. But I was sitting at the table where they were, and the porch railing outside the window was solid, and the morning was mine. If any of this sounds familiar, the person in the room who keeps the account open because closing it is too much, share this with someone who needed to hear it today.